This is Stephen McNallen broadcasting from the Folkish Federation space platform Werner von Braun, currently loitering in the rings of Saturn, to all our folk in the occupied territories of Earth with another episode of Gods, Folk, and Destiny. Some messages to our special friends behind the lines. The chair is against the wall. Tony says bananas are good. We drove the Chevy to the levee, but the levee was dry. Now, back to our normal scheduled programming. Gods, Folk, and Destiny. Whose gods? Our gods and goddesses, the holy powers of the north, led by Odin and Frigga. Whose folk? Our folk, born of ancient Hyperborea, now spanning the globe with eyes on the stars. Whose destiny? Our destiny, which we will win by hard work and mighty deeds. Honor, sovereignty, well-being, and the existence of our people forever. So shall it be. All right, folks. I couldn't resist a chance to shake things up a little bit. You know, sometimes that's just the way it goes. And that partly that's whimsical, partly it's lightweight. Yeah, just having a little fun. But on another level, it mentions the fact, or it suggests the fact that at some point our folk will have to decide what's going to be our destiny. Is it going to be the swamp, or is it going to be the stars? I choose the latter. Interstellar Lebensraum, man, works for me. Before we go any farther, remember there's 4 things you need to do to support this. You need to like it, you need to comment, you need to share it, and oh, what's the other thing? Whatever. This is a little different. It's kind of unrehearsed. I'm not really doing an interview of anybody else. I'm kind of was going to just interview myself, quotation marks, and just give you a monologue. But I thought about that, and I thought that even if I was in a really good monologue mood, it wouldn't be nearly as much fun as having, you know, like a real live human being responding. So, you know, Dave Martell's not with me tonight, but hey, I got a really squared away stand-in, young guy named Patrick. And Patrick's gonna ask questions and make comments as I kind of go through these points I want to make. It's going to start off kind of ooh-wow, a little bit lightweight even, but I think you'll see that it's going to get down to matters that are really important, issues that are really big, and things that affect us all, and which, you know, calls for our actions on some things. So, Patrick, how you doing tonight?
I'm good. I'm glad to be here.
Awesome.
I've actually watched a lot of your interviews, and I have a kind of you say casual interest in Asatru and sort of the sagas and the Eddas and various different things in European history. I don't know very much about it. I haven't really taken an academic pursuit of it. You know, I can't say, but I have a casual interest in it.
Well, okay. Well, very good. We're gonna give you some information to
One thing I am interested in, Mr. McNallen, is the connection and the roots that the kind of Eddas and sagas that have to very ancient Indo-European traditions. That's one thing I'm, you know, very interested in, because I noticed there is like some distinct similarities between Greco-Roman, Norse, and also the very ancient Indian traditions. You could say like the Vedic traditions.
Yeah, absolutely. All of these are related.
What is your comment on that?
They are related, absolutely, very much. I mean, linguistically, in terms of, you know, their origins and their pantheons. In most cases, their values. I mean, there are differences, of course, and a lot of them have evolved differently over time as they've separated out from, you know, their original source or sources. But there are amazing similarities now, especially within the European family. You know, we've got the Germans, to include the Scandinavians. Yeah. We've got the Celts, we've got the Slavs, all of whom are descended from the funnel beaker folk or funnel beaker culture. And so that's why we have so many amazing similarities between them. And that kind of works well because, a lot of Europeans are not 100% Germanic. I've got German, I've got English, I've got Irish, and a smidge of Scandinavian.
Germano-Celt here.
That works. It works. We're all brothers and sisters up there. I don't want to see any artificial distinctions between the different branches of our folk. No more brother wars. I mean, that's really an important thing. We got to understand our similarities. But Patrick, I had some strange things happen this last weekend. I'd like to tell you about it, and as well as our listeners. A sort of a weekend of high strangeness, you might say. It started off casually enough. I was going downtown. My wife and I got in the car, drove down to a little mining town down in the Sierra foothills here in California for a wedding. I do a few weddings. I don't do a lot of them, but it happens from time to time. And so I do an Asatru wedding for people who are in the Asatru folk assembly, or who are special friends of mine who are Asatru, or whatever it might be. So it started off very casually, very ordinary, and nothing unexpected. So we get down to the little town in question. That was on Friday afternoon. Get a parking spot at the motel, offload some of our stuff, go to the room. Of course, didn't get everything. Have to go back out into the parking lot. I'm walking towards my car, and here's this guy approaching me from about the 2 o'clock, and he's a big burly guy like this, and he's wearing a tank top, and he looks like he bench presses 400 pounds and stuff like that. And I'm just watching, and then he says to me, "Hey, brother, I didn't know there was any more of us around here." I'm taken aback. So I assume he's with the wedding party, which of course would contain many Asatru. And so he comes over and he shakes my hand and he starts talking, and it quickly becomes clear he's not a part of the wedding party. He knows nothing about the wedding party. He's just another guy wearing a hammer and with all the typical physical attributes that many of our guys have. And I thought, well, gosh, that's amazing, And I got to talk with him more, and we had so many things in common. He has a law enforcement and a military background. He's been following the gods for years. It's kind of cool because he runs a tree trimming service that contracts itself out to utility companies, to check the lines and so forth, and be sure that there's not a fire hazard. It's pretty big business, especially in a place like California these days, where everything's burning up. And he says, now, a little difference here. My memory of what he said was that all his guys in his crew of 10, that all his guys are us, are Asatru, are hammer wearers. He says that they hold bloats, which is, for those who don't know, our main ritual format, our offerings to the gods. And he says he's been doing this for ages, but he never heard of the AFA, the Asatru Folk Assembly, didn't know that there was any sort of a revived movement out there. He just doing it independently. And I thought, wow, man, what are the odds of that? And that was kind of cool. And I got to thinking about it. If we were going to decide what are the odds of that happening, would it be 1 in 100 running into this guy? Would it be 1 in 1,000? I don't know. Let's just say, because this will become important in a minute, let's just say that there's a 1 in 1,000 chance of walking out in the parking lot, finding a guy, follows our faith, never heard of us, has no connection to the wedding, no connection to anybody I know. Just bam. So, okay, now hold on to that thought. The next day, we go to the wedding. Wedding was really awesome. It was an AFA woman, Asatru Folk Assembly woman that I've known since she was a little kid, literally 5 and 6. I remember, like 18 years ago, she was at one of our Yuletide celebrations, and she waddled up, or toddled, because she was like 5 or 6, up to me with a drawing she had made on a piece of paper with crayons. And of course, I was touched by that, and I've still got that. I've still got that paper after all these years. But I never dreamed that I would be doing her wedding, which was kind of cool. So she, her family, many of our friends, were all there, many Asatru people, a lot of Christians there as well, you know, people who had who knew folks, you know, from their workplace and one thing and another. And so I did a little introduction kind of explaining what Asatru was, because if I didn't, a lot of people are going to wonder, you know, what this is all about. They're not going to understand the symbolism. It's going to seem really weird to them. So I wanted to talk to them and just get them relaxed, you know, that, hey, you know, this isn't as strange as you might think. And here's what this means. And here's what that means, and so forth. So all that went really well. And I felt really good about kind of introducing some people to Asatru, even if they're never AFA members or never follow the gods. At least they could be sympathetic. You know, they could understand us. So that was great. All right. So next morning, wedding's done. We're getting ready to go home. My wife and I, you know, we dress, we get our clothes and all of our baggage and stuff in the car. We go down to the little room in the motel where people go for breakfast and all of that. 6 tables there. We're sitting there eating, got our coffee. This couple comes in, a little bit older than us, not a lot, but a bit. And there's no place for them to sit. And being the friendly kind of guy I am, I said, hey, you know, would you guys please join us? And they said, sure, we'll do that. So they get their copy and they come over, and the guy starts to sit down and he looks at us and he says, nice Thor's hammers. Now, this is a guy who had nothing to do with the wedding, nothing to do with the tree trimming group. This is a different guy altogether, no causal relationship between any of the other things that have happened. He and his wife sit down and he tells me he's of Norwegian heritage. He pulls out his hammer that he wore next to his skin. And he said, yeah, when I was young, you know, I really hoped somebody would revive the old Norse religion. And I said, well, we've got that. And he was thrilled. He was excited. He and his wife are totally on board with, you know, our general kind of cultural, you know, and political worldview, and just really nice people. And I'm going to invite them to the next event we do out at the Hof that we have out in Brownsville here in California, where, as you know, you may know, and other folks listening may know, we have a 4,000 square foot facility out there that we own. So that was really cool. And I got to thinking about that, and I thought, so what's the chances of that happening? Man, that was so, I mean, that's never happened to me like that before, really, you know, and I thought, well, let's just pretend it's 1 chance in 1,000, which seems reasonable to me. Great. Okay. That was awesome. Exchange all of our info, get in the car, drive back up in the Sacramento area where there's an AFA meetup that's going on. And we wanted to drop in on that, drop in on the meetup. 2 tables full of people there, probably, I don't know, 18 or 20 people, something like that. Have a good time, knock back a German beer, good meal. And the waiter, you know, hanging around, running back and forth, and we want a picture. So we hand him a phone, and he takes it and he, you know, holds it up like this. And I look at his arm, and it's got runes tattooed on the inside of his arm. That's strange event number 3. Another 1 in 1,000 shot. Now, that might sound like just something of kind of casual interest, but if you think about the statistical probability of all 3 of those things happening, the tree trimming guy, the Norwegian guy over breakfast, and this guy, you'd have to multiply 1,000 times 1,000 times 1,000. That's the statistical probability, assuming that my, you know, 1 chance in 1,000 thing is remotely accurate. And that blows me away. I mean, that is such a statistical unlikelihood that you have to look at it as a Jungian synchronicity, as something that's going on in the collective unconscious of our folk. There's something stirring in our folk, and we've seen it happening for a long time now. It's, there's been a little something here and a little something there, and then more people are finding out about it, and more people asking about, hey, what's that around your neck? Or they're not even saying, hey, what's that around your neck anymore, like they did for years. They're saying, dude, nice Mjolnir, nice Thor's hammer, or hey, I'm Asatru too. And if I could plot out the curve on that, it would just be like that over the years. I started wearing a hammer 1970. For the first 2 or 3 or 4 years, nobody asked me what it was. Yeah. I lost my first one in Ranger School, and it came off during I had to take it off during the water survival exercise, but I've had one ever since, and no one for the first few years had any interest in what it was. But then they started asking, and now more and more are asking. In the last 5 years, more and more are asking. And the last 2 years, more and more and more are asking. There's an exponential curve that I think relates to the awakening of our folk. And that's important, because we have to awaken our people, or we're, to be colloquial, toast. So, Jungian stuff, synchronicity. You familiar with any of that, Patrick? You know about Jung?
Oh, sorry about that. I was away from the computer. Yes, I'm familiar with Jung. Yes, I'm at the archetypes and various different things that exist throughout civilizations. Yeah, I'm familiar with Jungian archetypes.
Okay. Do you know about his ideas on synchronicity?
I'm not. I've just started to get into Jung. Maybe you can, enlighten me a little bit about the synchronicity.
Jung noticed that some, quote, coincidences, things that have no cause and effect relationship whatsoever to explain why they happened at any given point, but which seem to be very significant coincidences. He called those synchronicities, and he felt that there was some underlying something in the collective unconscious that kind of brought these things together. And I think that's kind of where we're at. You could call it intervention of the gods. You can call it just a gradual awakening of our people, or you could call it synchronicity. But when you start getting 1 in a billion odds over things like happened to me this weekend, you got to look at that as something that's really significant. The odds against those 3 things happening in one weekend, to me, from these different sources, is so small that you've almost got to consider it as something, if I was a Christian, I call it miraculous. But I think we need to analyze these kinds of things. We need to analyze this change that's happening out there, because if this is something that we can influence, then we need to be doing that. It was almost like Sheila and I were a nucleus or an attractor that some way helped all of these statistically very unlikely things to happen. There's a quote that I don't remember who said it, but he said something to the effect that the universe acts less like a machine and more like an idea, a great thought. And I think that's kind of the level we're working on here. But if you can control synchronicity, if you can make it more likely or make it happen, that would be indistinguishable from magic, quotes, so to speak. So I think we need to think about what makes these things happen. Now, Jung, of course, when it comes to questions of the awakening of our folk, he was very interested, as you may know, in the phenomenon of Wotan, the
Yes,
German
yes.
middle name for Odin. And he says that what he calls the archetype manifested in the late 1800s into the early 1900s, and on up for the rest of the century, really, or the mid-century, and it was a powerful thing. It changed the culture. It was both part of the culture and it changed the culture, almost a feedback loop of some sort. I think everybody listening to this knows that we have to wake our people up. We have to have our people get it together and decide that we are, in fact, going to choose the stars and not the swamp. And I think Jung points us the way. There were a lot of things going on in Germany, say in the 1800s, that fed the crisis in German civilization. 1871, I think, right, was the establishment of the first actual German nation. And a lot of Germans were happy with that, but a lot of them felt that it didn't go far enough. It wasn't spiritual enough. It wasn't ethnic enough. It didn't have philosophical coherence and significance in the way they might have liked. And so that's why you had this unrest. That and industrialization was coming in, and Germany was being swamped by immigrants. Now, this sounds kind of like our situation today. We need to awaken our people. We need to stimulate the collective unconscious. We need to be triggers for synchronicity. We need to find ways of making those connections. The idea that underlies the idea of synchronicity seems to be that there's a web, and I know that sounds like something out of a science fiction novel or something, or a movie, but that we are connected in ways that are not obvious. We are connected in ways that are hidden and are non-causal. That is to say, it's not a cause and effect kind of thing. It's not a relationship that we can see and sense with our senses necessarily. I feel that obviously people of a similar genetic makeup are going to be more attracted to each other and more in tune with their very essence. We need to take this to the next level. We need to think about what we as individuals can do to be, quote, attractors or nuclei for this phenomenon of waking up our people.
Mr. McNallen, I'm sorry about this, but my OBS just kind of messed up. Sorry about that. The OBS, the connection.
Okay, what is that?
I believe you were talking about industrialization in Germany, and you're talking about how we are in this actually on fire, Mr. McNallen. You're on fire.
Yeah, brothers and sisters.
Yeah, you're on fire.
Yeah. So
I'd like you to expand upon that if you don't mind. Like, I like the way you compared the situation and the, early, kind of the late 1800s Germany to our situation.
Yeah, definitely.
From what I understand, from what rudimentary reading I've done of that period, it appears that, people were searching for something. The industrialization left kind of a void in people, kind of as it has us now. It's left a void. A lot of us are kind of isolated, and it feels desolate in Western society now. So I'm guessing it was very similar.
Yeah, you've pretty much got that right. That's the essence of it. There were huge social changes taking place, and there was a real separation of people from their background, from their more or less rural roots. A lot of that got lost, and you had people like Hermann Lentz writing novels, about earlier times when the Germans were more connected to their soil, a sort of Blut und Boden, blood and soil kind of thing, which I do think is an absolutely valid concept.
Yeah, Volkish society, right? Was that part of the Volkish culture?
Yeah, exactly. So people were exploring a lot of different stuff. You had theosophy coming in with Helena Blavatsky.
Guido von List as well, right?
Absolutely, von List, and many other people, sort of a whole occult fringe, some of which was spacey or worse, but a lot of it with a kernel of value and of truth. And then we saw what Carl Jung would call, the Wotan archetype phenomenon. We saw the fury of Wotan. We saw German militarization, and the focus on German power which was healthy actually. And it's good to remember though that Wotan is not just a furious god. He's also a god of wisdom, a god of higher consciousness. And I think we need to recreate, to bring about the awakening of Wotan/Odin. And we need to be sure that we balance out strength and wisdom to secure the destiny of our people forever. Now, that's kind of a big task. And I guess what I would like to do is go back and mention all those coincidences, all those synchronicities, and how people can play a part in that. I would like to just kind of give some ideas to all of your listeners tonight, or your listeners, my listeners, our listeners, as to what they can do. I don't really want this to be just an abstract discussion. I want it to be a practical discussion. The question is, if there are ways of increasing synchronicities, if there's ways of affecting other people through often invisible means, consciousness methods, so to speak, how do we do that? How do we use that to help awaken our people? And that's something I've given some thought to. I think everything that we do, that we think anything of significance we do, like ritual or spiritual actions, I think that they have echoes and connections that go beyond what we can see. I wrote once, decades ago, I don't even remember where I wrote it now, but I said something to the effect, there's really no such thing as a individual sacrifice, or bloat, as we would call it. There's really no such thing as an individual, isolated ritual, because it has ramifications and waves, stirrings that go to all of those people to some extent that we are connected with. We are connected, and we need to kind of realize how to take advantage of that. So I thought about, and what I would suggest to our people is that simply by seeking their higher evolution in terms of spirituality, in terms of their consciousness, is a good way. Living their faith, speaking to all the Asatru out there, are you living the faith really? Is it just how much does it affect your life? How do you do on a day-to-day basis? Because the things you do have echoes in eternity to some extent. For example, Sheila and I go out every morning, almost every morning, even on mornings when it's kind of rainy and unpleasant, like the last day or so. And we do our greeting to the day. We use verses from the Haufe-Maal, from the Sigurdrifu-Maal, which is actually a not that well-known poem in the Eddas. Hail to the day, hail to the sons of day, hail to night and its daughter. And we ask for blessings, and we ask for victory. And anything we do that increases the spiritual might of ourselves individually spills over to those around us. In a sense, we are all feeding off of each other, even if it's on an invisible level. I can't think of anything else that really explains this transition, this phenomenon that we're seeing. So I would lay it back on all of us, myself included, as individuals, and say, am I living my religion? Am I honoring the gods? Am I honoring my ancestors? Do I do bloat? What am I doing to deepen my wisdom? Am I studying runes? If not, why not? Am I using the runes as best I can? If not, why not? If a person is truly interested in evolving themselves in a radical way, of actually reaching higher levels of consciousness, I would suggest something like the Rune Guild, or I would suggest other consciousness raising methods, such as actually one that I have developed and haven't really published very much yet, and that'll be coming out at some point when I get around to polishing off some finishing chapters. We need to help each other. We need to become truly that folk in practice that we are in theory. And that has ramifications all the way from the very spiritual and non-material and etheric, all the way to the hardcore, just practical, helping each other, growing the folk, raising families, having babies, starting businesses, doing all the things that will make our folk stronger and more powerful. So what do you think?
Well, I say anything that will wake kind of Europeans out of the ignorance that we're in presently, then I'm all for it. Because I feel like we're kind of in a dark ages here in America. We're at a standstill. We're kind of at a stalemate in history.
Well, we are. I'd go farther than that. You know, I gave a speech before a group of AFA members recently, and it had some pretentious title like "Operational Environment for former military." What can I say? Operational environment for Asatru and AFA and our folk in general.
In the new dark age. In the new dark age.
Oh, as my wife just reminded me, in the new dark age. You know, I postulated that we are entering a dark age of censorship and of repression. And in fact, we're pretty well into that. I think we are. Are you familiar with the conspiracy theory regarding FEMA camps and all of that stuff?
Yes, my family is all on that. They believe in that kind of stuff. I personally don't believe in it. I think it's nonsense, but I do, however, think there is surveillance and there is people monitoring people, but I don't know if there is any kind of FEMA camp.
You know, and actually, I agree with you on that. I have never seen any convincing proof of FEMA camps. However, what we do have are virtual FEMA camps.
Yes.
From all of the deplatforming that's gone on.
It's virtual gulags, I would say.
Exactly. You know, we've got you know the big outfits where the quote normal unquote people go and they talk with each other. And then here are the, you know, we've got BitChute and we've got Gab and we've got VK and we've got MeWe. But, you know, it's largely an echo chamber. So what they've managed pretty effectively to do is to put us into an echo chamber over here while they are out there continuing their subversion of the general population. So we are, in fact, in virtual FEMA camps. That's kind of my take on it. So that's one existential threat. If we can't break that stranglehold, we'll cease to exist. And there's other existential threats, you know, surveillance you mentioned.
I believe it or not, I think we're doing a good job of this by, even though we're a small audience, this is a very dedicated, from what I've discovered, these communities are very dedicated to one another. And I think we're doing a good job resisting this. You know, they're not letting basically whatever you want to call it. I personally call it Zog taking our smile away from us.
Yeah. Well, you know, I hope you're right. Certainly, we're doing very good at communicating among ourselves now, I think. And that's step one. You know, that's where we develop our ideas. Very
few people understand. Very few people are going to understand. Most people are complacent. They like what they have now. At least that's what I think. I think they like the present system the way it is. It's either that or they haven't had an alternative and to what they have.
Well, you know, I think you're right. I remember when I first learned about the Chinese, you know, social credit system, you know, with 100% face recognition.
We have our own credit system here. It's called you can't get in the upper echelons of society if you do not adhere to neoliberal kind of you know, orthodoxy. If you can't get accepted into Harvard, you can't get into the Ivy Leagues, you can't get into the elites without having this kind of dogmatic belief system.
Right. Right. In regards to the Chinese situation, when I first learned of it, I thought, oh, well, man, that's so extreme. At least I know that Americans will never go for that. And then I realized, yeah, they will. Yeah, they will. Americans say they love freedom.
Yeah.
They say they love freedom, but they don't love freedom as much as they love convenience, popular approval, good credit ratings.
Yes.
All of those things. They'll sell their soul for that stuff.
You're right.
And so ultimately it becomes a spiritual battle. So,
and I think that Mr.
Mr.
Nallen, I think that is like one of the main problems with kind of white people in America is they've eschewed kind of freedom for comfort. They love comfort, and I think we need to struggle a little bit. I think we need to kind of start struggling a little bit more than what we have, because like we are probably going to face some harsh times collectively as a people.
Yeah. Well, there's all sorts of sayings about that, aren't there? They're true.
Yeah.
About harsh times and social effects, and all of them I think is very valid. We need some struggle in our lives. We've had it pretty easy, most of us, almost all of us.
Mr. McNallen, are you familiar with the Appalachian people in Kentucky and West Virginia? Are you familiar with these people, the hardy stock, the Scotch Irish that settled these regions?
Yeah.
Well,
Yes,
I come from that hardy stock of people, and I can say that we've struggled since we came here to America. And I find it interesting when you were talking about these folk ways, this kind of folk ways. It's very much still intact, even though they're Christian, in many other ways. It's dying out now because of modernization. But like I said, they've struggled forever, and a lot of us have been doing this since America's existed. We've never really enjoyed kind of the fruits and labor of America. Not to take away from anybody else, but we can survive. We will survive.
Yep. Actually, I've got ancestors from West Virginia and Ohio River Valley, that area there a lot.
Nice.
So, yeah. So no, I agree. There's that old song from some years back. It's probably still around. Country boy can survive.
Oh yeah.
And it's a true thing. It's a true thing. I mean, I'm a native Texan, and I know there's still a lot of people in Texas who have got that kind of grit. They happen to not live in the big cities, and usually they don't have a lot in the way of resources. But those things are there, and they're very valuable to us. Those of us who follow Asatru, most of us these days are pretty mature about it, but there's always a fringe of Viking wannabes. People who want to be the equivalent of Vikings, and they want to dress like it, act like it.
The LARPers.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm not really knocking those people per se. I mean, I think it's great to wear a beard, even one with all the little thingies in it, and it's great to have an axe, and it's great to have a drinking horn. Just realize if push comes to shove, it'd be better to have an AR than to have an axe.
Oh yeah.
So that's sort of a cultural thing that has to be worked with. People start off as Viking LARPers. They do. The really good ones work their way through that, and they don't lose their interest in the material culture of the Vikings at all. But they kind of do like I've done over the years, which is to the principles of Asatru and apply them to my daily life, like everybody else applies their spirituality to their daily life. You got to make it a real world phenomenon, and that's the only way you can affect the real world is with a realistic outlook, I think.
Definitely.
Well, Patrick, I think that's about all I've got.
Okay.
Do you have any questions, or do anybody out there have any questions that we need to address, or anything of that sort?
Anybody on the chat want to ask questions? This is quite a different audience. This is quite a different audience from what I'm used to.
Yeah. I thought a lot of people come to the chat just to be socialize, and I can't get butthurt about that. I mean, people do what people do. But I'm always glad when there's a question or something of that sort out there. One thing I do try to do, though, for anybody who's tuned in on this, I do try to respond to all the comments that people make. I try to hit every one of them. I think I've occasionally missed one.
Well,
but
actually, I do have a question for you, Mr. McNallen. Let's say like someone is not well versed in the history or like the reading runes or looking into the Eddas. What would you recommend they do if they wanted to further their study? Or
I would recommend they read my book.
Okay. All
And
right.
don't go away.
Okay.
And this is it.
Okay.
And if people want to order it directly from Sheila and I at wolfagemedia@gmail.com, we'll sell them one, and I'll autograph it, of course. I think it's a really good basic introduction. It's not designed to be too mystical or too difficult. I think that it's frankly, if I may say so, I think it's well organized. Has pictures of me doing weird stuff.
So you better explain.
Okay. Here's some weird stuff I'm doing. In one of these pictures, I'm pouring a libation on the grave of Robert E. Howard, the guy who wrote all the Conan stories.
Okay.
And all that stuff back in the 30s. And this one is me with my AK-47 in front of a Slivovitz still in Boston. So,
nice.
There's stuff there. There's stuff here. It's been a wild ride, and I loved every second of it. Well, mostly. So, yeah, people can get my book. And, yeah. And Sheila has just reminded me that I need to make a plug and want to make a plug for the Asatru Folk Assembly, which is an organization that I founded and which I led for 20 years and then turned over to much younger and energetic leadership. It's run by a fellow now who is outstanding at what he does. He does butt kick, Odin bloats, but that he can turn around and do the sweetest baby naming you ever saw. So he's squared away. He's a good guy. Got a lot of good people in the AFA. It is a folkish organization. If people aren't folkish, they really should be somewhere else. And Asatru Folk Assembly. You can find it online.
URL.
At
runestone.org.
Runestone, one word, runestone.org. You'll find us there. In fact, Sheila and I will be out there at the Hoff this coming weekend. So there it is. Any more questions?
I don't even know if there are any.
Okay.
If nobody has any more questions, I just want to say it's been an honor to talk to you, Mr. McNallen, today. I've really enjoyed our brief time here, and I've learned some things.
Kind of faded out there at the end.
No, I said I've really enjoyed our time here, and I've learned some things.
Okay, well, super.
So somebody has a question. Somebody in the audience has a question.
Okay, all right. Raising their metaphorical hand.
Excuse me if I mispronounce this, but Alfor Nordson, I believe, has a question.
Okay.
Here's one. How can you awaken the people around you? Have them watch the pink pill.
And what is that question?
Did he get one for you?
I think so. Or he was getting one.
Yeah.
Yeah, he hasn't typed it out yet, I don't believe.
I see my wife sees one question in there about how to awaken people around you. Mm-hmm. So while he's typing, let me discuss that. That's the easiest thing in the world. If you're Asatru, wear your hammer and be able to explain what it is. And be open to people who just won't get it, and you'll have to live and work with that. Live a good life. That influences the people around you. Whenever subjects come up or of a spiritual nature, don't hold back, just mention the fact that you are Asatru and explain what that is. And people look like they're the kind of people who are going to get all, weirded out about it. Just say it's Native European religion. Just as there is Native African religions, just as there is, quote, Native American religions, so also there are Native European religions. And that's a good thing. We're getting back to our roots.
A couple of people mentioned previous Troy Weishart and Ron McNallen, and have bought books because of them being on here.
Okay.
So, you might want to say that.
I also get from Sheila that some folks have posted that they really liked the programs that I did with Troy Weishart and with Ron McNallen.
Oh yes, I definitely I like that program a lot. And I have actually I had a question about Ron McNallen as well.
Okay.
Is there any way I can get in contact with him? Because I would like to talk to him.
He's on MeWe.
Yeah, I haven't been able to get in contact him that way.
Yeah, just send me your info and I'll pass it on to him.
I'm sorry, I just had to interject that. I'm sorry about that. I really wanted to talk to him about his experiences.
You're part of the audience too. It's okay.
Yeah, I wanted to especially talk to him if he wouldn't mind about his experiences maybe with Clausen and Lane, and potentially buy Victor of Valhalla off him if he still has some copies that are affordable.
Yeah, I don't.
Because those things are like $800 now.
Well, send me, email me your info, and I'll.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I'm sorry about that.
It's okay. Ron's a great guy. He's got integrity. He's humble. He's not full of himself or any of that stuff. I really love his
artwork too.
Yeah, no, Ron's a good guy. And same for Troy Weishart, who I had on a few weeks back. Deep man with a lot of spiritual insight, I think. So there's some really qualified people out there.
Somebody else plans for celebrating the 25th silver anniversary of the AFA.
Ooh. Yeah. Oh, and more input over here. Yes, we are going to be celebrating the 25th anniversary of the AFA.
A new calendar.
And we got a new calendar coming out, and there's just all sorts of cool AFA stuff. Really, I mean, I'm not saying this. I mean, obviously I'm biased, but I really think the AFA is an awesome organization, and that people will find we're doing a lot of stuff, and we're doing it pretty successfully. And best of all, the best indicator that we're doing good stuff is that we really piss off our enemies. They hate us, and I'm okay with that.
Have you made the SPLC list, Mr. McNallen?
Yes.
Really?
Yes, we have. Yeah,
but you're such a nice man.
Well, but can't you tell I'm such an evil racist?
Didn't you actually go to Africa and actually help out some people there? I mean, from what I understand.
I've spent more time with Black people than 90% of my critics. I mean, I've made 2 trips to Africa.
Do you think the guys in the SPLC would do that? I don't think so.
No, I don't imagine they would, especially some of the places I went. I mean, I was in President Trump had a term for some of those countries. But yeah, don't get me wrong, I had a great time. And to be fair, I got to say, I never felt threatened by Africans in the bush. I could be literally walking down roads in south of the Caprivi Strip by myself, and I never felt threatened. The only time I really felt threatened was in the big cities, and some of that was crazy as hell. But I've worked with Africans. I've walked through the freaking Sahara. Didn't walk through, hitchhiked actually through the Sahara. One thing and another.
The Burmese.
Myanmar, which I still call Burma, just out of habit. Went there, worked with them, worked with the Karen people and their struggle, and tried to help them out where I could. Walked through a minefield or two, stuff like that. And yeah, I did sell an article to, I did not sell an article from the Burma trip. Sold from my African trips. I was sort of a contributing editor for Soldier of Fortune for a few years. But, you know.
Alfar, forgive me if I'm mispronouncing that. I did not see your question in the chat. Could you type it? Or if whoever's, could you type it again, please?
Well, Alpha has a question.
Oh, do you plan to publish a Yuletide video this year?
Hadn't thought about it. I guess we could. Okay. I hadn't planned it, but I don't have anything against that idea. What we do every year, and maybe this is what he's referring to, we do our 9 years, aren't they 9 years?
12 days.
Our 12, 9 years, what's that about? Our 12 days of Yule thing that we do, where for the 12 traditional days of Yuletide, we have this little candle lighting thing, and you know, we read certain passages and identify with certain virtues and so forth, you know, courage, truth, honor, all that kind of stuff. And maybe that's what he's referring to. Yeah, we do that as a regular thing. We just repost, you know, the ones we've got.
I have a suggestion. Grab one of the book of faith book and show them that, because I think people just want some basics.
Okay, don't go away. So Patrick, you with me?
I'm with you, yes.
Okay, this is something that a lot of your readers might be interested in. Your listeners, excuse me, your readers in particular who are listening.
You got more listeners than me, Mr. McNallen.
Hold it close so they can see.
It's originally was designed for military personnel. It's on water-resistant paper, and it's designed to fit into a BDU pocket. But in fact, it turns out that it has such an excellent summary of what Asatru is about, just from the practicing viewpoint, that, you know, we obviously sell them to everybody, and it includes all sorts of stuff. It's got, you know, your basic prayers relating to the individual deities. It's got the entire Haufamal in here. It's got tons of material, some of which is very pertinent to warriors, and all of which is pertinent to anybody. A lot of stuff on the runes, you name it. There's all the rune poems, a prayer on the bearing of a weapon, and the death song of Ragnar Lothbrok, and stuff. Tons of stuff in a really very small little format like this. So there it is.
Yeah, they want $6 postpaid.
$6 postpaid.
Mr. McNallen, I think Althar wants to know if he can email you.
Yes, wolfagemedia@gmail.com.
And somebody else had a question. What's the biggest growth area of our movement at the moment?
Geographically, like the greatest area where we're growing?
I think what they mean is, I think what kind of segment of our movement is showing the most exponential growth.
Babies.
Okay.
We're
definitely
having loads of babies.
We need
in
that.
The AFA.
We definitely need
I'm not
that.
sure. Man. No, seriously, we're doing baby names out at the Hoff this coming this coming weekend. You know, it's
babies are being born by the dozen.
We are truly having way more babies per couple than your average white people. You know, and
that's great.
And we take good care of it. You know, it's not, and it's not just like a baby machine, you know, where this is not, you know, Lebensborn or something like that. You know, we these are good, solid, traditional families, you know, outstanding people, you know, and they're having babies, and it's nice. We like that.
Events all over the country.
major events in most corners of the country, minor events all over the country. I mean, every weekend, there are meetups here and there and yon. We're a very active bunch.
Allfar also says that you should do a live stream on Yule if you can.
Well, okay, that's an idea. Assuming that we're, in a position physically, if we're not like traveling or doing something like that, yeah, I'd be up for that. Yeah, we could do that. So, Patrick, when we've taken care of the questions, maybe we should go ahead and wrap this up, and
okay.
I would close with my usual.
I will do
my usual admonitions, to which I've actually made a slight alteration to my traditional close.
Okay.
I want to encourage people to support not only the AFA but Votan Network, which is my main propaganda / spiritual networking oration. You can find Votan Network Update still on Facebook, even though I have been booted from Facebook for ages.
You have a website.
We have a website for Votan Network, and that is Votan, with a W, of course, -network.com/blog. It's kind of complicated, but there it is. People can always play this back and hear it again. So is that about it, Patrick?
Yes. You want me to wrap it up?
Well, I'm not trying to get rid of you. Let me go ahead and finish my sign off.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, everybody who's listening to this, thank you for being here. Thank you for asking your questions and giving me a chance to run on like old guys do. But everybody knows, I presume, that you can reach me at wolfagemedia@gmail.com. You can also order a copy of my book there, and I'll sign it.
And the little one.
And the little book too.
Just write to us.
Okay, and you can write us there, and on it goes. So that's all for tonight, folks. Keep your powder dry, your cupboard full, your spouse happy, your children close, your data and your firearms out of the hands of the deep state, and love life in Midgard, for it is a wondrous gift. Good night.
Thank you, Mr. McNallen. I appreciate it. It's been an honor. Hey, no problem. And sometime, Mr. McNallen, if you want to come on my Surviving via America program, you're more than welcome to. I understand. Yeah. And I definitely would like, if you could, Mr. McNallen, to get in contact with Ron McVan and talk. I'd like to talk to him and have a nice conversation.